We dive deep into the ongoing war on Gaza and its far-reaching consequences. From the internal turmoil of Israel's leadership to the relentless clashes on multiple fronts, we explore the narrative of a conflict that has reshaped the region. Tonight we examine the failed strategies, growing discontent and escalating tensions, pulling the Middle East to the brink of an even greater catastrophe. I'm Henny Saif. Welcome to In Focus. As Israel's military campaign against Gaza reaches its first anniversary, what began as a show of force has turned into a painful reminder of its limitations. Netanyahu's government is now dealing with internal backlash over strategic failures, resignations from top military officials, and a nation questioning its leadership. The year-long war has exposed deep cracks in Israel's political fabric, with no clear end in sight.
As the sun rose over the Gaza Strip, what began as a confident military campaign for Israel morphed into a saga of embarrassment and repeated failures. The echoes of conflict lingered in the air, a reminder of a year marked by turmoil and missed opportunities. The Israeli army, once confident in its strategic might, found itself embroiled in a protracted struggle that defied expectations. Despite numerous operations aimed at restoring control, the occupation military's inability to decisively end the conflict became a source of embarrassment to Netanyahu's government. After a year of war on Gaza, a palpable tension loomed on the Israeli government. What was anticipated to be a decisive military campaign quickly devolved into an embarrassing stalemate, exposing cracks within the Israeli government and military. The failure left Netanyahu and war cabinet grappling with discontent, not just at the borders, but deep within its own political fabric. Internally, the repercussions were swift and severe. Political leaders questioned military strategies, igniting fierce debates about the effectiveness of their approaches. Discontent bubbled within the ranks, leading to a wave of resignation from senior military officers and security officials who could no longer bear the weight of failure. The specter of the October 7th breach loomed large.
A southern barrier. I said, we need a southern barrier.
Casting a shadow over investigations that revealed deeper vulnerabilities in national security. In the heart of this turmoil was Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. His criticism of Netanyahu's hardline military strategy following the outbreak of war put him on a collision course with the Prime Minister and his far-right allies, advocating for a more measured approach. Gallant's views starkly contrasted with the aggressive tactics favored by Netanyahu. Rumors of Gallant's imminent dismissal loomed large, suggesting a government at a critical juncture where internal loyalty was pitted against the very real consequences of their military decisions. As the year of war ended, the divisions within Israel's leadership became increasingly apparent. Critics called for accountability, while supporters of the military grappled with the disillusionment of a populace yearning for resolution. And now, Israel found itself not only at war with its neighbors, but also embroiled in a battle for its own identity and leadership. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward remained shrouded in uncertainty.
This segment focuses on the ongoing conflict in Gaza, a year since the escalation began. And we're joined now from California by Dr. Ashraf Singer, an international political analyst, to discuss the implications of this prolonged conflict. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Singer. Now, first off, What have been the main failures of the Israeli military operations over the past year?
So till now, Netanyahu and his cabinet didn't reach to their goal. Uh, my argument here that is, he couldn't till now to relieve the hostages in Gaza and still shooting, every corner in Gaza and moving to Lebanon. So it's a chaos now. It seems to me like we have a like huge failure in terms of achieving their military goals. So, so still working in different plans, still relying on that support from Austin, the Secretary of Defense here in the United States. So all of that kind of situation, it's unclear what is next for Netanyahu. Basically lack of victory. It's very clear. Uh, Lack of coherence inside his government and open, like ongoing, dispute with his people in terms of demonstrating against him and his policy because they didn't see any kind of clue that Netanyahu could really achieve uh, his goal or the military goal. So it seemed to me like Netanyahu in the middle of nowhere in terms of what we're saying. A year fighting, killing women's, kids, children's, Gaza, and Lebanon. This is not like a war strategy. This is about like a chaos and gonna to bring the Middle East in a huge conflict and regional war is coming for sure after Iran and Israel, change, the missiles and all that things, and we're expecting, Israel gonna to attack Iran again and Iran gonna to attack Israel again. So it's ongoing conflict over time. So it seems to me like, Netanyahu is a failure uh, politicians by all that means that is he couldn't really reach to his goal so far.
Mhm. So, what would you say are the broader repercussions of this conflict on Israel's international standing, keeping in mind the internal divisions within the Israeli political fabric?
So he failed really to achieve what we can say the international coalitions or collectively support Netanyahu for his goal. The only problem what I'm seeing here that Netanyahu really rely on Biden, Kamala Harris in terms of their words or their statements. We have strong support for Israel's security and the right to exist. And actually, this is uh, giving like a bad clue for people in the Middle East. They would like to see United States really show really cooperative, not really uh, giving, like the full support to Israel, not really giving the support for the victims in Lebanon and Gaza. In other words, even if Kamala Harris, the one guy asked her yesterday, "What's your future relationship between you and Netanyahu?" She said, "I have alliance with people of Israel," and she should add that she has also alliance with people of Palestine. So this is the core point. I can see like Americans still blind to see the reality on the ground, and this is why Netanyahu didn't really respect the international community. Fortunately, Macron, the president of France, yesterday, he mentioned that is, as a community or international community, as a European community, as a France, we should really put embargo transferring arms to Israel. I think this is a good point, but in terms of quantity, Israel is getting it is military supplies from United States. As United States here is ongoing in terms of giving money and arms to Israel. So this is mean that is Netanyahu going to lead the situation, not the United States. So the lack of influence of United States on Israel, it's pretty clear. And even Kamala Harris confirmed yesterday in her interview that is, Netanyahu didn't listen to United States views. Netanyahu didn't really listen to the strategist guys, either in the White House or in the different places. So Netanyahu is moving by himself and taking Israel for a dark future, and this is scary. I'm very scared, because if Netanyahu, is keeping, killing people, in Lebanon and Palestine, for what? For when? We need to stop this guy. This guy is out of control. This guy is irrational, and we need to really to do a lot as an international community. Just relying on United States can really change his position. Seems to me United States failed to change his position so far, and this is one of the major problems going to face the Middle East. I'm concerned. I'm concerned thousands of times. I'm concerned that is Israel can really open a fire and open a mini wars in the Middle East with Iran, Lebanon, Palestine, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. This is not really a state. We need to see it, to build like a safe path to create two-state solutions, to Palestinians and Israelis can really enjoy life together. We cannot really, seeing that over time since 75 years, all of the Arabs got killed as a chicken. This is not really the policy. The people of Arabs, people of Palestine, they have the value as the people of Israel. So they have the same values as a human being. This is the point that is we need really to stop this guy.
Yes.
He put his political survival over his goal to kill many people. We cannot really accept his political survival just to kill people in Gaza and people in Lebanon and increase, that shadow of regional war in the Middle East.
Dr. Ashraf Singer, the international political analyst, thank you very much for joining us. Israel's internal chaos is persisting, with Netanyahu facing mounting pressure over his handling of the prisoners in Gaza. The discovery of the bodies of 6 Israeli captives sparked outrage, leading to mass protests and even a rare general strike. The public is demanding accountability and an end to the conflict, while international mediators push for a ceasefire that Netanyahu continues to resist. The Prime Minister now stands at a crossroads, caught between a war he cannot end and a public he cannot pacify.
As the war on Gaza enters its second year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been facing increased internal pressure amid growing calls for a prisoner exchange deal. Protests have erupted across Israel, with citizens demanding accountability and effective leadership. Many Israelis have been expressing frustration over Netanyahu's handling of the conflict, citing a perceived lack of strategic clarity and ineffective responses to ongoing threats. One of the largest upheavals that took place in Israel followed the discovery of the dead bodies of 6 Israeli detainees in Gaza. Tens of thousands of Israelis had poured into the streets in grief and anger in what appeared to be the largest protest since the start of the war. The families and much of the public blamed Netanyahu for not securing the lives of detainees. In addition, a rare general strike was held across the country later. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said that Israeli people cannot afford to wait any longer, as well as the Palestinian people who are suffering the terrible effects of the ongoing war. Since then, weekly rallies are sought to keep up pressure on the Israeli government, accused by critics of stalling on a deal to end the war. While international mediators work collectively to finalize a ceasefire deal, Netanyahu obstructs these efforts by launching operations in the region that turns the scenarios of the conflict upside down. Moreover, Israeli media have reported the deep differences between Netanyahu and top security officials, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who says the time is right for a ceasefire. The battleground in Gaza has uncovered long-standing tensions between Netanyahu and his cabinet, amid increasing concerns in Israel about his effectiveness as a leader in in ending the war.
And for more analysis, we are joined from Alabama by Mr. J. Doug Davis, the Professor of International Relations. Welcome, Mr. Davis. Now, first off, focusing on the internal divisions and dissatisfaction within Israel. Now, over the past year, how have the internal tensions with Israel heightened since the war started?
Well, first off, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be back. But yes, of course, the war has generated tensions within Israel, and there's been a lot of frustration, in particular, with the inability to get back the remaining hostages. And so this is a major source of tension. And the major problem that we see is not that Netanyahu has acted out of sync with the Israeli people, but the fact that we see a contemporary democracy fighting a war. And so as a democracy fights, I mean, there are some elements that are in tension, such as the democratic need to be open, to have a free and open society. So there will be, in fact, be an openness for voices that will disagree with Netanyahu. At the same time, the complexity of national security having to respond to the greatest terror attack, the biggest death of Jews since the Holocaust, creates a lot of pressure for the government to act in a decisive manner. And historically, if we look at this over the broad spectrum, the way that Israel has generally responded to any kind of provocation is to have a disproportionate response. So if there is an attack from Gaza, then historically Israel would respond much more forcibly. And the idea here is that this creates an incentive to prevent future attacks. And so within the whole democratic system of Israel, there is the pressure of trying to reinforce national security in the complex era where there are non-state actors attacking and making their own population vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And any Western democracy that has experienced this would act in very much the same way. So, and yeah, I think part of the tension that you're describing is the fact that Israel is a free and open society, and there's a lot of dialogue, and there's the freedom to respond in a way to show that you disagree with the government. And the idea behind that is to make sure that the hostages are not forgotten. Mm-hmm. And so that's the main, I think, tension within Israel is over how to manage all those multiple priorities at the same time.
Well, sir, can you explain how did controversial statements by Israeli ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich increase the global condemnation of Israel's actions?
Well, I mean, because we have a free and open society, the statement by anyone can be used outside of the context in which it was originally given. So, of course, the statements by some Israelis will be used outside to attack the Israeli government. And to be, in all fairness, there are some things to be honestly critical of. Whenever we see civilian casualties, of course, that's a major issue. The major question is, why was Israel forced to do this? And the great thing is, while it is a free and open society, the one thing that we have to recognize is that the legacy of October 7th has left behind a lot of fear and anxiety within Israel. And it's going to take a lot to restore that, to get the society back to the way it was before that, if that is in fact even possible. And so I think that while there is the tension within Israel questioning the government and how, as you mentioned, that this is now applying in other global settings, but the harsh reality is there are really multiple factors that are taking place. And with a vulnerable population and fear, the government has a lot more freedom to act aggressively than it has ever had in the past.
Yes, Mr. J. Doug Davis, Professor of International Relations, thank you very much for joining us. It is very evident the divisions that you were talking about in Israel. Now, Israel's military actions have widened the conflict, dragging Lebanon into the fray and pushing the Middle East closer to an all-out war. Now, Gaza remains under siege, with thousands of lives lost, while cross-border clashes in Lebanon escalate. Netanyahu's government seems determined to push forward, but with mounting resistance from Hamas and Hezbollah, the region is now on the edge of a much larger and deadlier conflict. The question remains, how long before this powder keg ignites?
Tensions in the Middle East are reaching a critical point, with Israel's escalating military actions against Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, drawing the region toward potential all-out war. What began as targeted strikes and assassinations has now morphed into broader, more provocative operations, leaving the region teetering on the edge of conflict. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes have caused devastation, with over 41,000 Palestinians killed since October 2023. The humanitarian crisis worsens daily as vital infrastructure crumbles and aid struggles to reach those in need. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israel's recent attack on Hezbollah members, triggering explosions and casualties, has deepened the crisis. Hezbollah vowing retaliation, continuous cross-border strikes, and escalating tensions along the volatile border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has expanded its military objectives, determined to secure its northern regions from Hezbollah threat. However, Hezbollah's resolve remains firm, and both Hamas and Hezbollah seem prepared for prolonged conflict, fueling concerns of a broader war as international diplomacy continues. And on the other hand, the humanitarian toll rises and the prospect of full-scale war grows. Israel's military actions are pushing the boundaries, while Hezbollah and Hamas prepare for greater resistance. The region stands at a dangerous crossroads, with Israeli provocation pulling the Middle East closer to the brink of widespread conflict.
Welcome back. We now focus on the evolving situation. We're joined by, from Washington by Mr. Joel Rubin, an American politician and media commentator. Good evening, Mr. Rubin. Now, first off, the international community has been largely silent on Israel's actions, but the risk of a broader conflict is undeniable. So do you believe Israel's increasing aggression could provoke a larger regional war?
Well, it's great to be with you. And I don't think the international community has been quiet at all. But what I do think is that this is an incredibly complicated international security dynamic, and it requires all different players, Middle Eastern countries in the Arab world, United States, European countries and allies, as well as quite frankly, Russia and China, who sit at the Security Council, to pay attention and participate. And the war is expanding, without a doubt. It's very, very concerning. It's expanded now into Lebanon. It expanded into Lebanon largely because Israel, after months of warning Hezbollah to stop bombing its northern territories, decided that those calls were not being heeded. And so there it went. But there's a high risk to this because, as we know from history in recent decades, Beirut and Lebanon have suffered greatly when Israel has launched attacks and strikes into it. So this requires a lot of different countries, and I don't think we've seen enough pressure on some of the other warring parties, unfortunately, to try to make this war stop from expanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, the international community might not be quite silent, but it has been less influential But
Yes,
within Israel
agreed.
Itself, like, it faces growing internal dissent as the prolonged conflict drains its own resources and stirs
It
public
does.
unrest. Now, in your opinion, sir, could these internal pressures force Israel's leadership to consider its aggressive tactics, or are we witnessing a more entrenched militaristic stance?
You know, there are some very interesting polls that have come out recently about Israeli public opinion. One that struck me is that if there were an election today, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, the Likud, would gain the most seats, but in the elections as the number one party, but would lose overall seats that it currently has in its coalition. A bit of a paradox in that the coalition of his government is not popular, but the policies that he's pursuing broadly are. And this is where it gets complicated, because there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis that have been protesting against his policy towards Gaza, believing that he should take a ceasefire for hostage deal, that he should do more. Unfortunately, Yahya Sinwar in Gaza also has a vote, and he does not seem to want to make a deal. So I think Israeli politics are going to continue to pressure the prime minister as an individual, but broadly speaking, there is a lot of support for the policies of military strikes against Hezbollah and the continuing pressure on Hamas. But there still are loud voices, and I think making the right argument that a ceasefire is needed to get the hostages out of Gaza.
Mm-hmm. The American politician and media commentator, Mr. Joel Rubin, thank you very much for your insights on the ongoing situation. And as we continue to witness Israel's aggressive actions against Gaza, now Lebanon, the need for accountability and international interventions become even more urgent. Understanding the obstacles, the political dynamics at play will be crucial for any future resolution. And unfortunately, this brings us to the end of this episode of In Focus. But please stay tuned for more coming up on Q News. Thank you for joining us.